guys, it's Christa Watson here from Christa Quilts, and I'm excited to tell you some of the tips that I'm sharing in my brand new book with CNT Stash called How Do I Quilt It? Now, one of the most important steps in machine quilting on a home sewing machine is proper basting. In the book, I share with you my special spray basting technique that's unlike anything you've seen before. But you know what? It's magical because when every single inch of the quilt is sticking to every other single inch of the quilt, machine quilting is a breeze. So let me quickly walk you through my process, and you can always adapt it for your circumstances. My favorite tools for this are a can of 505 basting spray and my design wall that you see behind me. So the first thing I do is I take the quilt top and backing outside, spread them on a plastic table, and then spray a generous amount of 505 adhesive on the wrong side of the top and the back. Then I bring the layers inside to assemble them on my design wall. I'll use a couple of pins to secure it to the wall, and then I'll smooth it all out with my hands and a long acrylic ruler. I'll repeat this process with the batting, which I previously cut so that it's larger than the quilt top, but it's smaller than the backing, and I don't worry about lining things up perfectly. I'll repeat this process again when adding the quilt top. The nice thing about using a design wall is I can get super close to the quilt to smooth it all out. Then I use specialty batting shears to trim off the excess batting and backing, and I'll iron both sides to help set the glue and to get out any wrinkles. So when you have a smooth, flat quilt underneath your machine, machine quilting is so much easier. Now this leads me to one of the most important tools that I think you need for successful home machine quilting. You want a nice, large, flat surface area for machine quilting. A dedicated space with a drop-in table is ideal, but if you don't have one, you can always just use an extension bed for your machine. The important part about having large workspace is that you want there to be room enough to hold the weight of the quilt so it doesn't fall down. That's what creates friction or drag on the quilt. So if you can create less drag and less tension on the quilt, that's going to make for much better stitches. Now, I've actually designed a table in partnership with Arrow Sewing called the Christa cabinet. Yeah, they named it after me, but it is such a game changer when it comes to machine quilting. It has a nice large drop-down table that can hold many of the machines on the market. There's also room to hold your notions and things close at hand, and the important part is that you've got lots of room in front of you and the side, forming an L shape, which is really going to hold up that weight of the quilt. That is the #1 key for successful quilting. In the book, I go into great detail explaining how to break down the machine quilting process, where you should start on your quilt, and how to deal with the bulk of your quilt. All of these techniques combined together make machine quilting much less stressful and a lot more fun. In fact, I bet once you learn my techniques, you're going to want to quilt all the things. In the book, I also share some tips on how you can mark your quilt and how you can avoid putting lines on your quilt. One of the things I use is a creasing tool, and another one is painter's tape. It's like my best friend. So now I want to show you a quick video of how I used painter's tape on a couple of the quilts in the book. It's going to change your quilting life. When I quilted the straight lines of daisy chain, I used painter's tape to mark some of the lines. The gloves I'm wearing help grip the quilt as I'm pushing it through the machine so my stitches stay relatively smooth. And I don't get hung up on whether or not they're all the same size, because the more you quilt your quilt, the less the imperfections are going to show. On my machine, I'm using the built-in dual feed and an open toe so I can see what I'm doing. But this is the exact same technique as using a walking foot. So take my tips and just adapt them to your particular situation. I'll use my hands to smush the tape on the quilt as I stitch so that it stays straight while I quilt the entire line of stitching. Then I'll reuse the tape a few times until it loses its stickiness. I also used smaller pieces of tape when quilting the black and white version of loose weave for the random crosshatch quilting plan. Basically what I'm doing is using the tape to extend the seam lines in between the blocks so I have a guideline to follow. I'll usually just eyeball the distance when I'm quilting wavy lines, but if I'm stitching straight lines, the tape helps keep everything lined up. Again, I'm stitching with the needle right next to the tape for exact stitch placement, But when I quilted the randomly spaced lines in the rest of the quilt, I just placed my presser foot next to the tape or next to a previously stitched line, and then I changed the needle position to vary the line spacing. Well, I sure hope you enjoyed these tips. Be sure to pick up a copy of my book, How Do I Quilt It, so that you'll know how to properly stock your toolbox and have fun while you're quilting. I'm here to be your cheerleader so that you enjoy machine quilting as much as I do, and I can't wait to help you on your journey.